I would like to now tell you a story about my best friend and number one supporter, and how he changed our lives for the better. Now, I can't tell his story without telling my own, because he was with me on my decades-long journey through heaven and hell. In 2007, I met a great lady. Her name was Maggie. And we were together just a little over a year. And one day I left the house and I was driving down the road. And I decided, for whatever reason, I still don't know to this day, but I stopped in at the local pet shop and wandered into the section where all the dogs were. I stood there looking at about a dozen or so dogs in the cages, jumping up and down and barking at me. But there was one dog that caught my eye because he was not jumping around or barking. He just had his head up against the side wall of the cage, looking unimpressed. I got the impression he was basically telling me, I'm not going to get excited and jump around and bark because you aren't going to pick me. I've been through this many times and no one has picked me yet. As I walked up to his cage, I looked into his eyes, and he had the most human-looking eyes I had ever seen in a dog before. I had her take him out of the cage and played with him for a couple of minutes, and I immediately decided he was the one. They went to put him back in the cage, and I can see the disappointment in his eyes today in my mind. I told the lady, hold on, I'll be right back. I'm sure she thought I wasn't coming back. I went home and told Maggie I had a surprise for her, and we had to go right now, and we did. When we arrived back at the pet shop, he was taken out of the cage for her. And just like that, it was love at first sight. We took him home that afternoon, deciding to make our house a home. I think part of the reason I found Sprite that day was because I wanted to do something nice for Maggie, because a month before her cat Watney passed away, and I thought this might help her. This is the first picture taken in his new home, and the next day I named him Sprite, after Mark Levin's book, Rescuing Sprite. As Sprite settled into his new home, he soon realized he hit the lottery with us. You see, before Sprite arrived, I lived alone for years, and I was king of my castle. Then along came Maggie, and she became the queen of the castle. And then Sprite moved in and took over, and now he thought he was king. It was utterly amazing to me how he turned Maggie into the maid and me into his chauffeur. He was driven in the coolest of cars over the years. When I got Sprite, I decided immediately he would be raised in a house free of fighting and arguing of any kind. Me and Maggie never argued. We were soulmates. Keeping this promise was a key factor in what made Sprite the type of companion he became to us. He clearly had a loving but persistent and dominating side to him. But he was an especially smart dog. We taught him a lot of the meaning of words, and by age 2 he had amassed a large vocabulary. At first, the rules were simple. No dog in our bed, and no dog on the couch. After about 4 months, all that changed. He made sure of that, and so did she. I started to realize many things early on about Sprite, and the one that stood out the most to me was how much he loved being free during our walks around the lakes and the woods. And being free meant no leash.
Oh boy, there's fishes in there. Huh? There's something.
Sprite made many friends with me early on driving around in the car, often visiting friends and business associates. He became my partner in crime. I felt it was important for him to interact with my friends and family members' dogs, and there were many. But his first and best buddy was Sweden. Sweden was Maggie's sister's dog. He was a seeing eye dog about 3 years older than Sprite. He took Sprite under his wing early on, and this was the start of their lifelong friendship. The one thing I have to say about Sprite is he was not afraid of other dogs. Even a pack of them. He thought he was 6'7" and 300 pounds when he was with his dad.
Here comes the pack. They got to check him out, see what he's doing. Oh, he's mean, he's mad. Everybody out of my way. He's telling them.
Looking back on Sprite's life, his first 4 years seemed to be the simplest of times for him and us. The car, his ball, his bone, the park, and visiting his friends were his only concerns. After all, he was just a kid. And just like that, his birthdays flew by, and before we knew it, he was 4 and showing signs of maturity. In July of 2012, we decided to take a week vacation, just the 3 of us in Wisconsin. It was a great time. Everything we did, he was right with us. Fishing, swimming, boating, but his favorite was frog hunting. He would wake up and make a beeline for the lake to look for the frogs ribbiting on the lily pads. He could spend hours while I fished making all kinds of noise and splashing around trying to catch one. He never did, but he came close a couple of times. Towards the end of the trip, I was on the boat fishing tied off from the dock, and Sprite was frog hunting along the side. As I reeled in my frog lure, something was following it, and as it got closer to the pier, I could see it was a big snake. And as I pulled the lure back into the boat, the snake changed direction and started to go after Sprite. Sprite was knee-high in the water hunting for frogs. I grabbed him by the collar and threw him into the boat, and grabbed the anchor and hit the snake in the head with it. It was at least 5 feet long, and it was very fat. We only had 1 day left, and after that, Mom said no more frog hunting. He was sad when it was time to go home. The memories we established with Sprite on the trip made us want more, and we decided to make an extreme change when we got home. We wanted a better park environment for Sprite, and in October of 2012, we decided to move to a nicer place. Maggie found us a place, and this home had a park 1 block away with a lake. It was perfect. It was called Rocket Slide Park. This park became Sprite's new kingdom. He used to like to go up into the rocket and survey his kingdom from up high. And after that, he would hit the dock to bark at the ducks and chase the geese when he spotted them. And by sheer coincidence, it happened to be the same park I grew up in as a boy, and was a couple of blocks away from my childhood home. He loved the new place, and life was good, and everyone was happy and healthy, and all thoroughly enjoyed the first year in the new place. Sprite spent more time with Maggie more than me in the early years. 2 years before we got Sprite, my granddaughter was born. And I felt this negative change sweeping across the country, and decided to try and make a difference in her future. In 2010, I met Andrew Breitbart. He was instrumental in starting me on the decades-long journey covering the protests popping up all over. I met many people that had the same concerns as I did over the years. And I spent a lot of time on the road, away from Maggie and Sprite, covering these events. more time I spent around these insane people, the more I wanted to be home with Maggie and my dog in peace. But when I got home, my guy was always waiting for me. After 4 years of training and getting to know Sprite, I could see there was more to this little dog named Sprite than met the eye. And over the next 8 years, I would find out why we found each other that summer day in 2008. Life has a way of changing things very quickly, and sometimes not for the better. In this case, the unimaginable became a shocking reality for my family and Sprite. In late 2012, Sprite and I went to see Bailey and her dog Charlie. When we pulled up and got out of the car, my son-in-law's mother met us at the gate, and she looked as if something was wrong. As she stared down at Sprite, she told me Charlie died the day before. I gave my condolences to her, and Sprite and I left. I remember sitting in the car, feeling bad for Charlie. He was Sprite's friend for over 2 years. I looked over at Sprite, and he just stared out the window up the driveway for a couple of minutes. When he finally turned to look at me, he lifted his paw and lowered his head as if to say, I know. I knew that he knew something was wrong at the gate because his tail was down and he wasn't his normal excited self. And for days I could see a change in Sprite, as if he was mourning the death of his friend. I really felt bad for him because this was his first experience with death. I didn't take Sprite back there for over 5 months. Not until they got a new rat named Mika. And after the arrival of Mika, Sprite and I started making our regular visits once again.
Mika.
Take a picture.
The,
You going to take a video?
yeah. So adorable.
In 2013, Bloody Chicago was born. One day I woke up from a sound sleep, grabbed my camera, and found myself in the killing fields of Inglewood. After 2 months of covering the extreme violence, watching the bodies being hauled off, I was starting to think this wasn't for me. It was just too damn extreme. After 2 months of all this bloodshed and insanity, I started to get this bad feeling in my gut that something bad was going to happen to me. The last weekend in September of 2013, I went out that Friday evening. And when I woke up Saturday morning, it was still with me. I wasn't going to go out Saturday because of this. I changed my mind, and later in the day, I decided to go out. But first, I thought I would go see my granddaughter, just in case something happened. That Saturday evening, I showed up at my son-in-law's house. And Bailey was standing in the driveway and ran up to the truck and said, Grandpa, you got to come over here and see this bug. I said, where's this bug? And is it still there? And she said, yeah, he's there all the time. I walked over to my son-in-law's bedroom window, and below it was some kind of a plant. It was a big green lettuce-looking plant. She leaned over in front of me and said, you see him? I looked and said, no. And she pointed. You see him now, Grandpa? I said, no, I still couldn't see it. And when she reached out and touched it, then I seen it. I remember feeling like it was an out-of-body experience, like I was watching this as a third person. The bug she found was a giant praying mantis, the biggest I have ever seen. And when she touched it, it sat still and rolled its big round eyes completely around and focused on her. She was standing there smiling at it as it was staring at her. And I was looking at them. It was very eerie and a surreal experience, to say the least. I said to Bailey, "Let me go get my camera. We'll get some pictures of it." She said, "Yeah, then I could take them to school to show my class." I did take 3 photos of it. And still, that feeling in my gut was stronger than ever. But I decided to go out anyway. I gave her a kiss and a hug, and then got into the truck. And as I was pulling away from the house that evening, she stood in the grass waving goodbye. And she yelled out, "Don't forget about the pictures, Grandpa." And I yelled back, "I won't." As I drove away, I could see her waving in my rearview mirror. After I left Bailey's house, I did go out. And I was nearly killed in a block party brawl between 100 residents. Because I showed up way too early while the fight was happening. Bricks and bottles were being thrown. And when I walked up with a camera in hand, they attacked me. As I backpedaled the hell out of there, cops were pouring in. It was a close call. 2 hours later, I was involved in an attempted carjacking at gunpoint. The guy was being chased by cops. He pulled a gun on me, and as the cops closed in, he fled. That night I went home and thought, what a night. This must be why my gut was warning me. But the next morning, the bad feeling in my gut was still with me and stayed with me for the next couple of days. And because of this, that Sunday, I decided not to go out. On the afternoon of Wednesday, October 2nd, 2013, my granddaughter suddenly passed away, and several days later she was laid to rest. I quickly realized when she passed away that alarm that was going off in my stomach wasn't about me. It was about her. It was a very sad and emotional time for our family. For almost 2 weeks, Sprite was left in a state of confusion and extreme loneliness. He was confused about what had happened to his daddy. As things settled down, Sprite started to wonder what had happened, and he was bound and determined to find out what it was. A couple of times over the next week, Sprite came into the living room where I was sleeping, and he would put his nose up to my face and just stare at me while I was sleeping. The first time I woke up, there was his nose to nose with mine. He scared the hell out of me. The first time it happened, I yelled at him and he ran away with his tail down. By the third and last time he did this to me, I knew he was now looking for something, but I still didn't know what he was looking for. Days later, my daughter came over, and she was a wreck. And when she walked in and sat on the couch, Sprite jumped up on the couch next to her and empathetically put his head down and raised his paw, as if to say he was sorry for her loss. This went on for a couple of minutes, and then he just quietly sat next to her, appearing as if to mourn with her the whole time she was at the house. The next day, Mags and I were invited to my daughter's apartment for breakfast, and we decided that morning to bring Sprite with us to cheer everybody up a bit. When we arrived, he dashed up the stairs, and when she opened the door, he ran in immediately and started feverishly sniffing around the apartment. Then he jumped on the couch and stood up with his paws on the back of the couch, barking at the picture of Bailey in her fairy costume. A week before this, I painted the wall, and my daughter and I went out and purchased a bunch of frames for the pictures of Bailey to be put on her memorial wall. We all stood shocked watching him bark at her picture for over 5 minutes, till I made him stop. Then he ran to her bedroom door and started scratching at it. He wanted in there in the worst way. My daughter and I debated if we should let him in. This was a very tragic place in the household. It was basically closed off after she passed away. We decided to let him in. He ran in and sniffed around for a second, and then focused on the corner of the room. And to the surprise of all 6 people in that room, they watched Sprite stand up on his hind legs, looking at the corner while dancing in circles over and over, and making these loud-pitched whining noises as if he was crying for something or someone. This went on for minutes, and during this time, it hit me like a sledgehammer. When he was around 3 years old, I started taking him to see my granddaughter every weekend, and she would make him dance for treats in a circle. She was the only one that ever did this type of thing with Sprite. No one else knew this but me, Bailey, and Sprite. The first night Bailey was laid to rest in the cemetery, I spent the night there so she wouldn't be alone. And something surreal happened to me in that cemetery on that foggy October night. I don't speak about it much, but it changed my view on life itself. And when I saw what Sprite did that day in her room, I knew a couple of things. She was in that room, and this confirmed she really did come to me that night at the cemetery. And I also knew he knew she was in that room. And Sprite and I now had a bond that I never shared with any dog or human being before. Sprite and I now became witnesses to the arrival of her spirit. This left a bond between us that was sadly understood. 6 months later, I returned to the streets, but not to the streets of Chicago. I went to Ferguson, Missouri, and filmed the riots and looting. And when I came home, there was my guy waiting for me after 3 long days on the road. He knew I had been through hell. I was sick for over 3 months with tear gas poisoning. It was coming out of my lungs and sinuses in 10-inch strands. And he stood by me throughout this. 6 months later, I returned to the bloody streets of Chicago. And over the next 5 years, I witnessed inhumanity in ways I can't describe. The more horrors I seen, the less I wanted to be around fellow human beings. I became introverted, and Sprite became my support mechanism throughout these very depressing and enlightening times. While I was in the streets at night, Sprite became Maggie's guardian, and her support system as well. Because she worried about what could happen to me on the streets. He actually made bloody Chicago possible because he kept Maggie's mind occupied while I was in the streets. Sprite had a lot of routines, but the one he did regularly was using his head to push the door open and barge into my office while I'm editing videos. He did this in the early morning hours, about 5 a.m. I believe he came in to check on me, and this was how he started his day. What Sprite really hated was getting his winter coat and shoes on. He needed the shoes because he would always get salt caught between his toes. So Maggie bought him the booty shoes.
Ciao. Oh boy, you ready or what? His ass.
Come here, bud. He walks a little funny.
He hated them the most, but once he was out, he strutted along without a care in the world.
We gonna get the ball? Okay. Let's get the ball. Are you ready to go get it?
And then there was ball time at the park, with either Maggie or myself.
Come on, puppies. Good boy. A mouthful of snow. Come here. Can you bring me here?
Maggie would take Sprite every morning on the nice days to the park to golf ball hunt along the driving range. He had the biggest golf ball collection of any dog, and he loved carrying them all the way home to show me his find of the day. What he really loved to do was chase squirrels and the geese at the park, but never, ever caught one.
All right.
After the park and breakfast, he demanded his treat ball. It kept him busy till his afternoon nap. I think the thing Sprite loved the most was hanging out the car window. He always looked like he was riding a motorcycle. He loved the wind in his face while hanging out the window. I think it felt like freedom to him. And people loved looking at Sprite's big ears, flopping in the wind, rolling down the street. Sprite was known and loved at the bank, and every time we went to the drive up, he would patiently stare down the teller so she knew he was there so he could get his annual treat.
Thanks so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Waiting for a treat.
He's waiting. There it is. Oh, there it is. Oh, boy.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. That's what you've been waiting for.
Things slowly started to go back to some semblance of normalcy, at least for Sprite. Everywhere I went, I took him with me. His normal schedule resumed. Eating lunch with his daddy in the car.
We go to two places for burgers. Portillo's or Burger King, right, buddy? We were at Burger King, but they took too long. And Portillo's was down the street, so we came here today instead. But Portillo's has great burgers. The reason why I like the Burger King burgers for him is because they're real small. This is a very big burger. I give him less than half of it. And then tomorrow or the next day I'll give him a little more. But we normally do lunch about once a week. Right, buddy? We got a schedule. We do our lunch. It's a messy procedure, but he's my guy. We've been sharing the same germs for 11 years. Why stop now, right? That's right. And he's very well mannered. He don't take food out of the bag or off the table. He's a good boy. Yeah, he is. Well, there he is. What's up, buddy? Oh, look at all your little friends here. Oh, yeah, bud.
Sprite loved going to the groomer. I used to tell him it was school. He liked it because he was able to freely interact with the other dogs. The name of the spa was called Absolutely Perfect. And he loved the owner, Samantha. She was good with him and to him for over a decade.
Yeah, you can see, but at least
Probably just depends on it.
he looks like he's feeling good, like, he's not lethargic at all, or...
Right, and he was this morning.
Yeah, no.
Are you a good boy?
Going to the store? You stay.
Going shopping at Petco. His favorite aisle was the bag dog food aisle. He was always finding little pieces of food on the ground that fell out from the bags.
He does.
You do. You got this one?
Boy.
Sprite loved going to the airport to pick up his mommy because her work had her traveling a lot, but he would sit patiently waiting for her.
He's waiting for his mommy to get off the airplane.
Playtime at home with his mountain of toys was a demand of his. He would approach one of us and bark at us until we played toy box with him. He had a great memory for the names of the toys in those two bins.
Another one. Oh, there's his brother. Oh, there's his cousin. And they're gonna get you a lot of pigs. All the pigs. They don't like you. Oh, they don't like you.
Uh-oh. Sprite was always on the lookout for Mommy, coming home with bags. He just couldn't take it. He had to know what was in them. He always inspected every bag thoroughly.
Oh, yeah. You gotta look in there and see what's going on. Goes.
Our dinner time was a big deal for Sprite. In 11 years, I never ate a complete meal at home because I always had to share with my guy. But his true joy was nighttime harassment of his mommy for his chew bone. He was relentless. He wouldn't stop till he got it. And this signaled the end of the day for Sprite. In the middle of the night while I was working, I would periodically have a bowl of Rice Krispies. And Sprite would come out like clockwork to get his allotment of Krispies. He really loved Rice Krispies.
I give him his Krispies. Stay, buddy. Okay. He loves his Krispies. That's for sure.
In 2016, during the most violent year of the decade in Chicago, Maggie thought it would be a good idea to get me away from the mass violence starting to consume me.
Satan Mayfield out of Chicago, caution fire alert for gay crime activity. He's a mafia insane, and other than that, he's clear.
So she booked a family trip to Kentucky. We had so much fun with just the three of us that we did it again in 2018. I knew after he turned 10, things were going to start to change because old age was setting in slowly. He made these trips memorable and special for the three of us.
Are you taking all them toys with you? Seriously? All of them? Are you going on vacation?
Driving with Sprite on the way to Kentucky was the best of times. I love this clip of the Johnsonville Brats truck passing by. I knew after this, someone was hungry.
Hey, Bubs.
He would sit on his mommy's lap damn near the whole trip. He loved her deeply, and he was her protector, and I was his. As we got closer to the cabin, Sprite's level of excitement increased, and I would say, "We're almost there, Bubs." And he would pop his head out the window and take in all the smells of the new land he was about to explore. This driveway is by far the steepest driveway I have ever driven up or down. Look out, Bubs. Watch out for that bottom. We're here, Bubs. We're here. Sprite was so excited when we got there, he didn't even wait for us to unpack. He jumped out of the car and made his way to the lake. Oh, he was looking to see if I was coming. He loved the water. He didn't get this type of freedom at home to go in the water when he wanted to. And of course, his other favorite pastime was digging in the mud. You stay out of that mud or your mommy's going to have to give you a bath.
What are you doing? How come you're so dirty? Huh? Hey. Digging in the mud?
Because you're not getting in the same bed with mommy and daddy like that.
Are you dirty? Hey. What's that on your head?
He thought I was bluffing about the bath. And now he's trying to escape mommy's justice.
Sprite, get over here.
You didn't like your bath, did you?
Come on, buddy, wake up. You want to go on the boat? Not yet? Okay. Get a little more sleep. Uh-huh. I think he's trying to tell me something.
You going swimming? Or you want to go on the boat? There's your boat, Mr. Bubs. There's your boat.
At first, Sprite didn't know where he was going. But the minute he seen the water in that boat, he knew we were going swimming. I think he remembered when we went to Wisconsin. Eating was number one with Sprite, but boating and swimming was his thing. It was his time to let loose. We cruised in the boat, scouting for a spot for all of us to swim. Maggie gave this trip to me as a gift for my 50th birthday. And it happened to be the first week of September when the season had already ended, which turned out to be great because no one was on the lake. We had it all to ourselves. And that was fine by me, and by her, and by Sprite. Sprite got his first experience eating in a restaurant, and he couldn't wait to accost the poor waitress for food. After lunch, Sprite ran back down the boat dock like a dog on a mission. He kept turning back looking at us like, "Let's go, slowpokes, the day's getting short." After lunch, we found another beautiful cove, and we swam all afternoon. And you know, it never gets old watching Sprite's anticipation and excitement build to jump into the water and swim his day away. As the day drew to a close, and it was time to head back to the dock and then the cabin, it was only the sad part of the day for Sprite. It's been a long day for Sprite, and he needs to get his rest. And it's time for bed, because we got a big day ahead of us tomorrow. We're going fishing. Oh boy, look who's up and ready to roll. I can't believe I didn't have to wake him up. Wow, look at him go. He's ready. We cruised around the lake for a while looking for a good spot to fish. And we don't want to fish here. That's the Kentucky State Prison, Bubs. Sprite liked fishing, but only when we caught one. If we didn't, after a short period of time, he would jump in the water and go check the bobber to see why there was no fish. He was an impatient fisherman. Sprite got a rare treat to see a rare fish. This fish was following our boat for quite some time, and we showed the people at the marina a picture of it, and they told us it was a billfish, possibly an albino. They said they had never seen one with these colors before, and neither had we. What Sprite really did for us was, he made us a family. And he was our kid. He liked the simple things in life, and his love for us was unconditional. And when the three of us were together, we had no want or use for other human beings. All we wanted were each other, and the world didn't exist to us on trips with Sprite. You see, he succeeded with us where other humans failed us over and over. And he made the times we spent together as a family unit special. Because he was special. I always felt he was sent to us. Sprite truly understood the human condition. He was always concerned when we were down. It had been 2.5 years since Bailey's death. Her death, combined with the violence in the streets, gave me nightmares on a regular basis. And I would get up and go sleep out on the couch. And Sprite would follow me out there and climb up on the couch, lay his head on my chest for a while, and stare at me. Then he would turn and move down between my legs and fall asleep with me. It always seemed to make things better. He truly understood what was happening to me.
Hey, Bubs, what Daddy got?
Brats for dinner, oh boy.
You remember them? Hey, were you thinking of these? Huh? Did you have brats on your mind? That's what we're having. All right, then.
You're obnoxious, but
Hold it.
Does he have a nice watch? I noticed he was checking his watch.
Sprite gets his bone and then bed. He's tired. Get your rest, buddy. We got a big day planned tomorrow.
Do you want to go mudding? Or you want to go fishing? Well, come here, tell me. You want to go see the buffalo? Well, what do you want to do today? You got to tell me. Okay, so you want to go see the buffalo? You sure? Okay. Then we'll go see the buffalo today.
You ready, Bubs? We're going to see the buffalo. The place we're taking Sprite to will be like Jurassic Park for him. He has never seen big animals like the ones he's about to see. I hope they're out, because sometimes they're not.
That's Santa's reindeer. If you're not nice, he ain't bringing you no presents. Thanksgiving is not far away. Just warning you guys.
You see what's in here. There are some really big animals like you. These are some really big animals, and Sprite is not afraid. I don't think their size intimidates him at all.
Sprite. Get us killed.
Sprite got to meet 2 horses. One of the horses came out of the barn to see what all the ruckus was about. He seen Sprite and wandered away. I think Sprite thinks all these big animals are just other dogs. The horse that came out of the barn had had enough and went back in the barn. This was a treat for Sprite to see the horses up close. He was really revved up after this encounter. Maggie and Sprite were really happy, and that was enough for me. This was the 10th and last day of the trip, and we spent it fishing. I think Sprite is unique because he was able to separate himself between Maggie and I. He fulfilled our needs equally when we were together. We didn't have a care in the world. And when we walked together, our steps had purpose. He taught us what love and loyalty really was. He was her assistant in the kitchen and her little snuggler and bodyguard when I wasn't home. He became my release when I came home from covering the violence on the streets of Chicago. He would hear the alarm set on my car, and when I walked in, he would be waiting with his paw up. And the minute I seen him, everything that was bad disappeared. He truly was the humanity in the inhumane world I was living in. We learned so much from Sprite. He had insights into Maggie and I that I sometimes think he knew us better than we knew ourselves.
Oh boy.
He was our rock.
No, you don't bite him, Bob.
We
You gotta
both
look at
depended
him.
on him. And he depended on us. And we needed each other. And the balance he provided to us was perfect and pure. He always did what we did. He had a lot of human qualities. But the biggest quality Sprite had was he had the most human, empathetic eyes I have ever seen in a dog before. That's why I picked him. When I seen him, I was right. He turned out to be our dog of a lifetime. This 2018 vacation was the last trip we would take with Sprite. And this was the last boat ride him and I would ever take. I had a feeling when we left the cabin in Kentucky, we would never return. And unfortunately, I would end up being right. I started wondering, where did the past 10 years go? 10 years? I don't know. I sit sometimes and wonder where they've gone. It was one hell of a trip, and the memories we created on this trip would last us a lifetime. Thanks, Max.
Say goodbye.
When we got home, life resumed for Sprite, Mags, and I. I went back to the streets. She went back to work. And Sprite did what he did best, make us happy. He was our joy and our sunshine, even on a cold, gray day.
You waiting for the grill to get started up and let's roll, huh?
His birthdays rolled by pretty quick. They were a big deal in our house. We celebrated every single one like it was the first. But as his birthdays flew by, I started to get nervous and worried about how long he would be with us. Happy birthday.
Happy
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sprite. Happy birthday to you. About 6 months later, my friend John's dog, Ozzy, Sprite's buddy, passed away suddenly. We went to the house days after he died and didn't know when we arrived that he had died. We were shocked, and Sprite was looking around for Ozzy, but he was gone. And I think Sprite sensed something was wrong, or something happened to Ozzy. I seen up close what my friend John went through after the loss of his guy Ozzy, and this worried me about what was coming for Sprite. As the holidays rolled around, Halloween was the first, and Sprite liked Halloween because he loved helping me with all the candy for the candy drive for the kids in the poor neighborhoods of Chicago. This was the 3rd year I had done it, and Sprite was always a big help with the inventory of the candy, and he loved being involved.
Little menace.
Over the years, life was taking its toll on Sprite's friends. Sprite's visiting circle started becoming smaller and smaller every year. He lost many friends. Sandy, Charlie, Philip, Susie, and his 2 best buds, Sweden and Ozzy. Maggie and I lost 4 very important people in our lives from 2013 to 2019. The first tragedy was the death of Bailey. And then Maggie's dad died. And then my dad died. And then Maggie's mom died. These were very tough times for us and for Sprite. As the tragedies mounted, we each started to depend on each other for support. But Maggie and I looked more towards Sprite for the joy that was slowly disappearing from our lives. Sprite always came with me to the cemetery to visit Bailey's grave. And sometimes he would go with me to see my dad. He was with me through it all. Over these 5 years, we began leaning more and more on Sprite as life became so unfair and tragic to us. I don't know how we would have made it through all these bad times without our rock Sprite carrying the weight for both of us. Thanks, buddy. In 2010, I made Sprite the Maggio News mascot. He had his own page at Maggio News, and I produced 4 videos about Sprite's life. Sprite also starred in half a dozen Bloody Chicago videos over the years. Sprite also had a magazine article written about him. He is indeed a famous dog in Chicago. People still ask about him on YouTube comments today. Christmas time in our household was always a big deal for all of us. Sprite knew the minute the tree started going up, gifts were coming. I normally set up a Christmas village called Baileytown. I started collecting the pieces for the village the year before she passed away. Sprite never bothered the village. He would sometimes sniff around the pieces like an inspector, but he was always good. He never disrupted the town. On Christmas, Sprite was like a little kid. He was caught cheating a couple of times, and he would regularly search his mommy's closet for gifts when she left it open. And this Christmas, he was recently caught opening gifts before he was allowed to. He just couldn't wait. He was a bad boy.
What are you doing over there? Did you start without us? Somebody couldn't wait. He opened up his pig. There's the pig.
Hey, Sprite! When his gifts were all opened up, he would look towards his stocking, and then he would help us open our gifts.
Take care of that.
I sometimes wondered if unwrapping the gifts were as important as the gifts themselves to Sprite. I think he just loved the sound of the tearing paper. Either way, he made out like a bandit.
Come on, buddy. Yeah, that's right. Let's get on it. Are you tired out from your big adventure of present opening? Yeah, you did pretty good. And open. He's a bad animal. Come on. And that's what he likes. Yes.
This Christmas would be much different than any other Christmas we had spent together, because we weren't sure if this would be his last Christmas with us.
They're yours.
On November 29th, Sprite and I were playing Roggin with his pigs. And he was playing very rough and lost his grip and hit the left side of his face on the dresser. He seemed to be okay, but when I checked his face, I seen a quarter-sized lump on the side of his face. I thought there's no way it could have swelled up that quick. And I knew in my gut something was way wrong here. So I showed Maggie, and she said that doesn't look right. So days later, I took him into the vet. While Maggie was out of town for work, I took Sprite to the vet, and he checked him out. And my worst fear became reality. It turned out to be a cancerous tumor. The doc did a biopsy, and he told me we would have to wait about a week for the results. This photo was taken of Sprite while we waited for the doc to come back into the room. I think Sprite knew something was very different about this vet visit, because he had this sad look and fear in his eyes. I left that vet feeling like I had been hit by a truck, and now I had to tell Maggie. I waited a couple of hours because I just didn't have the heart to tell her. And eventually she called and wanted to know what happened, and I told her. I could hear the optimistic tone in her voice, leaving. She was clearly devastated by the news. When I left the vet that afternoon, I just drove around with Sprite, and we went to eat at Burger King, and then just kept driving. I didn't know where we were going. I think I was just trying to drive us back in time to when we were all happy and healthy. But I knew that would never happen. Later that night, I took Sprite to get his mommy from the airport. It was a very sad ride home. We decided no matter what happens, we will do whatever it takes to save him. While we were waiting for the results, we kept praying for him. And 10 days later, the first biopsy confirmed it was cancer. But they didn't know what type, so surgery was scheduled a couple of days later. We dropped him off for surgery, and about an hour later, the vet called and told us surgery would not happen because the cancer had spread to the lymph node in his throat. And their recommendation was to see a specialist up north. We were devastated and rushed over there to get Sprite. Days later, we went to see the new doctor, and he scheduled a surgical biopsy to find out what the hell it was. It was done 2 weeks before Christmas. Sprite can be seen in the Christmas video with a bandage around his neck. And now all we could do was wait. We savored that Christmas like a good glass of wine. I documented it because I felt in my heart he was going to be taken from us. I just knew it. On January 3rd, 2020, the surgeon called and told us he couldn't do surgery because the cancer was spreading rapidly through his lymph nodes, and there was nothing that could be done for Sprite because the type of cancer he had was rare and resistant to radiation and chemo. And now it was confirmed, and our world was crashing down around us. We both broke down that day because our future was now uncertain, and we now knew it would not include Sprite. The doctor told us he had weeks to live, but Maggie decided to try whatever she could to save him. They gave him medication, and Maggie took him to a holistic doctor, and she prescribed natural remedies to try shrinking the size and aggression of the tumor. And then days later, a tumor-shrinking electronic current ring arrived, and Maggie kept up religiously with the flood of medications and a 3 times a day use of the neck ring. I know she knew deep in her heart Sprite would be taken from us, but she was bound and determined to try anything that would either prolong his life or hopefully save him, no matter what the cost. In November, I stopped going into the streets because of what was happening to Sprite. And Maggie and I decided after the diagnosis to spend as much time with him as possible and let him have whatever he wanted. And we did. The car rides increased. His mom would take him to Starbucks for puppuccinos or shopping at Petco more than normal. We gave him his favorite, ribs and steak. He loved eating them off the bone while I held them for him.
All right, here we go. Oh boy, look at that. Whoa, get that piece before it falls. Oh, there it is. Wow, that was a big piece of loving.
And his mom gave him chips because she liked seeing and hearing him crunch away. We were also napping more with Sprite as his energy level started to fall and his days grew shorter. We dropped everything and stayed by his side every moment. I even stayed up nights watching over him while he slept. I tried to make the days longer to give me more time with him. We owed him this for more than 12 years of happiness, and we wouldn't have it any other way. Sprite was growing weaker and time was running out, so I decided to take him to friends' houses, which he spent most of his life visiting, and I took him for farewell visits. He still liked going by my friend John's house because before Ozzy's death, he got 3 new dogs, and Sprite liked watching them train. Even while he was very sick, he still wanted in on the action.
Oh, he just took the whole thing down. What's happening, buddy? Oh, he got the ball. You want to go by Matt's house?
His favorite house to visit was Matt's house. He's been going there since he was a baby. This was a very sad last visit. When their daughter Abby had a serious spinal surgery, I brought her a stuffed replica of Sprite to make her feel better while she was in the hospital. The stuffed Sprite really cheered her up, that's for sure.
Mama wants to see you.
Come on, buddy.
Mama wants to see you, baby. Okay.
Oh, he loves coming by Matt's house. That's like his favorite.
He loved bossing Joycey around for treats, and she had a big basket full of Beanie Babies for him. And Sprite would leave 1 or 2 by the front door so he wouldn't forget to steal one on his way out. He did this every time he visited. I'm going to now tell you how smart he really was. Whenever he went by Matt, we went up the front entrance. But one day we went up the back way, and Sprite wasn't sure which entrance we were going to leave from. So he put 2 Beanie Babies by the front door and the back door, leaving no chance of not getting out of there without a stolen toy. He was a thinker, that's for sure. This is his stolen Beanie Baby collection he was so proud of. Sprite had a little evil streak and a competitive side to him. He was bound and determined to compete for position in the household. He would fight us tooth and nail to keep his bone. He would try to scare us off with his teeth and growl. He would always protect his mommy from Big Bad Daddy, and I would let him feel tough and would back down, and let him be the alpha dog to build his self-esteem. For 12 years, he tried to take our spots in the bed, damn near every night. And we would shoo him off to his spot in the middle of us. But days before he passed, I let him have my spot. And I slept in the middle, in his spot. I felt it was important to give up the fight and hand Sprite the victory he fought his whole life for. Sprite took a turn for the worst on March 11th. He came to me for the last time for his late-night Crispies treat. I could see he was fading away. His face looked tired, and I now knew he was hiding his pain from us. He was still trying to make things seem as if they were okay. But that night he turned his back on me when I reached out to comfort him, and I knew the time we were dreading had arrived. Sprite fought hard for 12 weeks, 6 weeks longer than the doctors estimated his final days to be. I truly believe he fought to stay alive for us because he didn't want to leave us. I believe his thoughts were about us at the end. He knew what his death would do to us. I think he was trying to save us from the avalanche of pain and sorrow that was coming. The next morning, Maggie said goodbye to Sprite, and she was in shock and just tried to comfort him in the way a mother would to her sick child. And then I told him goodbye.
I want you to know that you've been my buddy and my pal for almost 12 years. And I appreciate everything you've done for us. You've been a good, great addition. And I'm glad I had this time to talk with you. You've been my buddy, my pal, my fishing partner, the guy I look to when I come home at night. Helped us through Bailey, Grandpa, the other Grandpa, and Grandma. You've been a very strong soldier all these years. And I want to say goodbye.
Hours before he passed away, I slipped my chain and medallion around his neck so that when he passed away, his spirit would leave his body and pass through the chain and medallion, leaving remnants of his spirit with me forever. On Friday the 13th, 2020, Sprite passed away. He died on our living room floor on his favorite blanket. Maggie and I were there as he took his last breaths. He looked up at me with fear in his eyes, as if to ask me, why? Why can't you help me? Please help me. He lowered his head and then sadly passed away at 2 p.m. Right then and there, his entire short life started to play out right before my eyes. I protected him his whole life and couldn't protect him now. And there was nothing I could do for him. I leaned over by Maggie while she was holding him, and I gave him a goodbye kiss on the nose. I had felt his pain and suffering were now gone.
Digging in the mud?
And he was in peace. And I just sat in disbelief wondering where the 12 years had gone. And what were we going to do now without him? Our joy had left us. And he was one of the few joys we had left in our lives. Over the years, we put so much time into him because his loyalty, understanding, and love resulted in unconditional joy all the way around. He was the nucleus of our lives. He depended on us and us on him. We knew we would never hear his bark again or see his ears flapping in the wind or walk with such purpose down the block on a sunny or cold, rainy or snowy day anymore. Our loss was total. I then leaned over him and clipped a couple of strips of his hair from his ears and stood up, put my gloves on, and wrapped him in his blanket and carried him down to the police cruiser and laid him gently in the back seat and turned on the emergency lights and drove in silent disbelief to the vet. When I arrived, I carried his lifeless little body in, laid him on the examining table, gave him a kiss, and then took my gloves off and stuck them in the blanket with him. And just like that, the best 12 years of our lives had ended. Rest in peace, my little friend. Your mommy and daddy love you and will miss you forever. When the time comes, we will meet again at the Rainbow Bridge. I promised you, little buddy, I would tell your story, and I have. I kept my word. Rest in peace.